Hey everybody, in this video I am going to show you 20 commits that I made to the Zulip code base that are randomly chosen over a period of almost 10 years. And I'm not going to go into great detail on any one particular commit. I'm just going to try to give you a flavor of what it's like to contribute to an open source project that has a large surface area, and all of these commits are related to the Zulip project. And I'm not going to describe Zulip to you other than saying that it's a free software product that accomplishes the same things as Slack, except in a superior way. But with no further ado, I'll just start working through 20 commits that I chose randomly using this fairly simple methodology. First commit, adding a comment. Adding comments to open source projects is very useful. If you're a first time contributor and you read the code, you don't understand something, ask what the code is supposed to do, and then add a comment to the code, and then you can contribute useful stuff. In the second commit, I'm dealing with the fact that we were trying to export data from this competing product called HipChat, and we would get certain situations where path doesn't exist, so I just skip over it and just log it. Here I remove an unneeded idiom. This may be the smallest commit in my series where I literally remove 3 characters from the code. There might be something smaller, but I guarantee you these 20 randomly chosen commits will include at least one more one-line change, I believe. Renaming stuff. So we renamed the concept of a subject to the concept of a topic in Zulip's fairly early history, but it wasn't early enough to be an easy change, and this was a major migration. But a lot of what you do as a developer is simply rename things in a hopefully careful way. This is a testing change, and this is like actually a fairly deep change to how we unit test our Java code. This is a feature-related change. I think this is the first change where I'm actually like improving a feature. And this change, by the way, goes all the way back to 2013. Zulip has this concept of auto-completion in its search, and in this particular commit, I allowed widening of searches, whatever that means. It's 10 years after the fact. I'm not even sure if that code still exists. Bug down is Zulip's variation of the standard Markdown markup language for marking up text. And in this change, wow, this is one of my bigger changes. So this is obviously another feature-related change. This looks old because I don't remember doing regexes. 2018. Okay, so reduce overhead of building link regexes. We're building the same link regex every time we build a Markdown engine, which happened twice per realm. Okay, so this is a performance improvement, obviously, and I don't remember any of the details. I could probably like read this code and kind of refamiliarize myself with it. This will probably be the biggest diff. Yeah, so like I didn't write this code originally, but I moved it, and GitHub doesn't really show diffs in like the most semantic fashion, so it looks like I added all of this code where really I just moved it. That was part of a big refactoring, but that was like me being a senior engineer and really like cleaning up a tricky piece of code. All right. right, let's move on. Okay, so this is testing related code, obviously. Test the unread process, loaded message ignores read messages. Well, that's really straightforward. Okay. At least on the surface. Fix bad tags. Okay. So this is also really simple. And this goes back all the way to 2013. So one of my major contributions, not major, but one of my contributions to the Zulip project is that I wrote some tooling that prevented us from having mismatching tags in our templates. But in 2013, we did not yet have this tooling, so we would often write HTML templates with mismatching tags. And obviously somebody caught it. They assigned it to me to fix it. It may have been me that caught it, but of course I don't remember 10 years later. But this is a fairly straightforward change. Another very minor change. A lot of changes on an open source software project are surprisingly minor. So I alphabetize cases for event. Okay. So this is a purely cosmetic change in terms of the fact that we're not actually changing the behavior of the software. We're literally just changing the code itself. And basically, like, we have this code, the Zulip has this code in the project that has like a massive switch statement in JavaScript. And the code just reads nicer. This is code that I originally wrote, so this is I'm in this commit I'm fixing something that I originally just kind of implemented. I won't say carelessly, but not with the greatest attention to detail. And I just put the case statements in order and just makes the code easier to read. And you could probably do that with tooling now. All right, next commit. Make relative link tests slightly more realistic. Okay, this goes back to, by the way, I said earlier the bug down is, I think I said earlier that, yeah, bug down is what is Zulip's variation on Markdown. And this is unit testing. Zulip is very good about unit testing. Try to make some tests more realistic. And yeah, this looks like essentially like a 4-line change. I guess it's technically, no, it is a 4-line change where I just add this 999 dash prefix into various things. I mean, I don't remember the exact details on this, obviously, but I think my intention here was to make it less likely that the test would succeed sort of accidentally. But I could be wrong about that. Another refactoring change. So let me read the comment. So I moved by sender URI to hash util. I'm not going to explain this in great detail. I mean, evidently, we just essentially moved a function from one module to another. And I mean, that does happen over the course of a long project. You have a function and it can it can be kind of coherent to like mix it with one group of functions or another group of functions. And sometimes when you're pushing features out, you don't get overly particular about how you group functions together in modules. But as the project evolves, you sort of learn that like a certain function doesn't really belong in this module and it belongs in another. And so then you move it. And this is a perfect example of that. Use user IDs when processing recent PMs. Let's see how okay. Another very short commit. Use user IDs when processing. So I made this commit in 2017. So just a little over 6 years ago. I kind of wish I had maybe added a little more explanation in the commit message, but it's a pretty small commit. It doesn't look overly consequential. This is another commit related to our unit testing in JavaScript. I'm going to go on to the next one. Let's see. So let's see, this commits 2016, so a little under 7 years ago from now. I said, don't pass user profile object to client put. I'm going to read it. Oh, yeah. If I'm reading this correctly, this is an example of a change I made to the code that was eventually abandoned because, I'm not completely sure. It's been so long. But I think I had like a fairly good idea about improving our test code, and I implemented it, and it just turned out not to be long-term maintainable. And I think that's the reason that I forget what's happening here, or I could just be sort of cloudy about it. But things like that happen over the long-term evolution of a code base. Okay, so this is probably like out of this series of 20, this is probably like the 7th refactoring commit that I've randomly extracted from all the commits that I've made to this code base. And it says extract update stream topic message flags. And it's not it was a pretty good commit message writer in this message, because I said this is mostly a pure code extraction, but we do disregard the messages option for stream topic updates. So let's see what it looks like. It looks like an improvement to the code, because we've got this simple thing where we used to have that relatively complicated thing. Although I guess again, this is a case where I wish like GitHub could somehow show diffs in a more semantic fashion. But basically, I extracted this function. This logic right here used to be part of a bigger function, and I essentially moved it to another function so that when you're in the bigger function, you don't have to worry about all of these details when you're reading the update message flags function. You just know that if stream name's not none, then we just return update stream topic message flags. Another extraction. This is very straightforward. This is just moving a list. I make basically a list of files apparently in the middle of some function, and then I just promote them up to the sort of like module, to a module level variable within this lintall script, which is written in Python. It's a little hard to tell that it's Python code just from the name itself, but it's obviously Python. Annotate. So Zulip uses MyPy, and we in Zulip you annotate all the functions so that our tooling can do static typing checks of the code base before you even run the code. And let's see. So let's see when this was. This was in 2016. So this is when we were first starting to do it. We were trying to get all of our code annotated, but we had to cheat in certain instances and say that a type is just any. but it looks like I actually kind of planned for the future because even though the type that I added is any, I at least gave it a name that says this is custom fetch. I don't know how to express custom fetch in terms of actual Python types, but I know that whatever I'm going to annotate as custom fetch is indeed a custom fetch, and I think we'll see that down further in the diff. Oh my God. Like now I'm remembering. Okay. So this is before we were using Python 3, and because we were still in the Python 2 world, you couldn't actually put the annotations inline in the function definition. You actually had to create a comment underneath of the function definition to describe uh, the static types. So it's sort of like a Python 2 way of expressing an annotation to MyPy. But since Python didn't understand it, you had to put it in a comment. But MyPy, when you ran the MyPy tooling, it would understand it. I mean, that's a long saga. But going back to my original point, I said that I kind of punted on being able to find out what the actual primitive types custom fetch could be expressed as, but I did at least come up with a name for it so that when we would later go to annotate this function, someone wouldn't just see any here, they would see custom fetch and they would know that they needed to find out, or they needed to specify further what a custom fetch object actually represented. Good gracious. All right. Let's see. Another refactoring. Cleanup is web public flag. The is web public flag is already in API fields. So there's no reason for all this complicated logic. Let's see the essence of this. This is relatively recent, but I don't remember the exact details of this. There's no reason to hack it on this. Okay. So in the database, we have a table called stream, and then we have a table called subscription, which is basically all the subscriptions for the stream. And we're trying to produce a subscription object to send to the user. But I think the subscription object sort of already implicitly contained the stream, and the stream already had the is web public flag on it. So all of this code here to kind of like paste objects onto other objects was apparently unnecessary. And I guess back in 2020, I was smart enough to figure that out and improve the code. Here's another MyPy thing. We just talked about MyPy. Earlier in the evolution of code, we unnecessarily made this thing an optional string, but it turns out that string is always going to exist. That's it. That's 20 commits. I hope this kind of gave you the flavor of what it's like to work on an open source project with a really big surface area. I'm going to partially attempt to summarize what I did here. I think like at least over 50% of my changes were refactorings in nature. There was at least one change where I simply added a comment to the code. Most of my refactorings were pretty small. There was that one markdown related change where I don't even really remember the details, but I do remember that was like a pretty major overhaul and required some like pretty serious thinking. Whereas most refactorings, I won't say most, but like a good portion of refactorings really are just sort of like realizing you just put a function in the wrong place, or you just picked a bad name and you just fix it, and that's like part of how a project improves. And then, three or four of the commits were feature related. And I don't know, obviously this is a random sample, fairly small sample size of 20, but I hope this gives you a flavor of what it's like to contribute to an open source project. Thanks for listening.